I was interested in talking about the pros and cons of Evergreen. You said this is your first year there, but you have a relationship that goes on for quite some time.
This is my 4th year there. Okay. I just finished my senior year with the formal education. I'm taking another year with a dual degree option to pursue some really good research opportunities that include immunochemistry and that sort of thing.
What's immunochemistry?
So immunochemistry, I'm trying to develop an in vitro test for sensitivity to vaccines.
Okay.
And immunochemistry is the reactivity of different chemicals to immune function in proteins in whatever human beings or whatever animal that you have.
That sounds kind of complex.
It's very complex.
Yeah, like I know biology is complex no matter what. But that like trying to study like the immune system and how chemicals interact with it, that's got to be so many different multiple variables going on in that. There's a lot going on. It requires a lot of independent study. But there I have a lot of opportunity for that independent study. What do you mean by that? Because that's one of the strong points for Evergreen that I've experienced too. So how has it been for you to do independent study? What does that kind of generally look like?
So the professors, comparatively to my previous experience in a graduate study, even though it was a completely different study, is the accessibility of the professors. And the professors at Evergreen will feed you the information over and over again in a regular teaching environment, but they will also answer your specific questions and allow you and help you to connect that auxiliary information to the original information that they taught in the first place. And that's done through establishing relationships with different professors over time. Yeah. And since they're such small classes, it's no problem. I mean, that my other undergraduate experience was that there was 200 to 300 people in a class, and you showed up for lecture, you turned in your completed work, and if you weren't there, nobody cared. Nobody was looking out for you. Nobody was looking after you. And if you didn't turn your work in, it was completely on you. There's no concern in the standard university setting.
That you feel is present at Evergreen.
I feel that it's very present at Evergreen, at least in the sciences. I haven't experienced anything anywhere else. I did have classes, like I said, with Dr. Peros, but those were also science classes. That was the only difference. Everything else has been extremely focused on science, medical science.
Okay. So basically you're saying you haven't really experienced much in the way of the humanities side of Evergreen.
Not at all. My partner is an Evergreen graduate from 1988. Okay. And he was attending some writing classes, but I saw similarities between how the professor and students interacted. So I assume it was laterally, but I've seen other information that says it's not true.
What do you mean information? Just stories? Or?
I've seen stories, I've seen film. Yeah. Some of it was provided by you, some of it was provided by other people. That some of the humanities and gender studies people can tend to be very bigoted. But I haven't ever experienced that in the sciences.
That's one thing, and thanks for showing up and talking about this, because there really is a difference at Evergreen between the STEM-focused fields and, generally speaking, the humanities. Now, I know that there are silos within the humanities that are not, I guess, as you used your word, bigoted, but I know for a fact that the STEM side, there's not a lot of time, it seems like, for that kind of behavior to manifest. Is that like a supposition that you would agree with, that people are so focused on getting their work done, they don't have time to...
I totally agree.
Dust up?
I think even if they are provided the opportunity, neural set of the STEM people is not to be like that. It's not to try to chase each other out. And that's strange to say that because STEM is supposed to be competitive, highly competitive. And on the level we are, but it's more about what you do rather than who you are. There's none of that regular pigeonholing that goes on with different types of people.
Like different characteristics.
Yeah,
kind of
whether it's outward or personality or inward or we are just competitive on a level of what you can do.
Yeah. What
can you do? What can you accomplish? How creative are you at your design, experimental design? So it is different from what I've seen, but I haven't experienced any bigotry in the sciences department.
Were you around during the 2017 spring protests?
Yes.
And you were taking a STEM course?
I was in integrated natural science. It was known as Introduction to Natural Science, which it's not introductory. I found out it's very hard. It's the lower division science, so that's considered freshman and sophomore science program. That's year long, 16 credits per quarter. We had 3 faculty that were team teaching, and we had 2 faculty remaining in the spring because the number usually goes down as people choose different programs or decide to leave. And I was in that program, and I was kind of walled off because of the program I was in from the happenings on campus. The only effect that was really felt was first when we had the bomb threat or the active shooting threat, and then there was a bomb threat, and we had to leave campus, and it was terrifying. And we also felt the heavy effects of having 2 science professors leave the next year, and it shifted.
Being Brett and Heather.
Yes.
Okay.
And it shifted everything so much. A lot of people lost their classes and were forced into classes or programs that they didn't prefer. They hadn't really had time to compensate for that, and the students or the school. And it left a big gap. I believe that gap is still there. I've been personally working with hiring, forming a hiring committee. The formation will be this summer. And that's one of the aspects that's going to be looked at, is to get another evolutionary biologist, which Evergreen is very hesitant to do.
Why do you think that they're hesitant? Just for that position? Is it because it'll bring up associations, or are they worried about trying to attract an evolutionary biologist at this point?
I think they're worried a little bit about attracting one. I've been through pay scales looking at what Evergreen can afford, what their pay rate is now, and that's a difficulty all in itself, is finding appropriate faculty. And it's really hard for me to make that admittance to you out loud because of how public that your work is. But we have a problem with funding because we do pay faculty lower than most of the rest of Washington State as far as 4-year institutions are concerned. So there's the pay problem. Also there's the notoriety problem, because Brett and Heather were essentially, they were chased out. You can't work in a hostile environment like that. Nobody should be expected to work in a hostile environment like that. And I have my misgivings about Brett. I do, as a biologist, but I think there are avenues to argue with people who you don't agree with scientifically. It's not personal. And I just don't believe that his theories are sound. But that shouldn't have created that hostile work environment for him. And then the final thing is Evergreen's hesitancy within itself to approach this problem of having another evolutionary biologist that may say distasteful things that people do not like, with rough language. Scientists are notorious for being kind of limited on semantics, and I will admit that I'm like that myself too. They're very limited on their semantics and how to break it down and how to communicate in a way where people will understand, but it still is reflective of the original principles.
Yeah.
That's a big problem in science. There's a whole entire movement to make science accessible to even the American public, and that still holds true at Evergreen.
And by accessible, do you mean like using more sensitive language, or dumbing down the terminology, or breaking down the concepts into more easily digestive forms?
I think it's the challenge is to use a more common language that people are better associated with. Not necessarily dumbing it down, but using a more common language that most people use. Instead of using a highly specialized technical language, that seems to be the biggest part of the movement. And there is a sensitivity factor, because if you're using words that make people shut down, and this is totally a well-documented psychology aspect, they will never listen to you again. And then you lose that person. And we are all here and in this together.
Yeah.
And when it comes to science and things like climate change and our environment and human health, we have to approach it more
Together then.
together.
You have to unify people.
You have to do whatever you have to do. And I really feel like the objection to making the language accessible is essentially shooting ourselves in the foot.
To get back to that kind of observation you're making about the silo effect between STEM and the humanities, at least at Evergreen, it seems like one thing that is lacking, that is displayed in what happened and is still happening at Evergreen, is this lack of communication itself. Like it could be the case that we really need humanities departments to make an effort to work with scientists to bridge that gap on just a language level, on a discussion level.
There's a problem. I've been to faculty meetings quite a bit recently because of my interest in faculty hiring that arose from personal conflict, and I will be happy to share some of that as much as I'm legally allowed to at this point. But there's a lack of science teachers at these meetings.
So they're not showing up?
They're not showing up to the all-faculty meetings. So the scientists are every bit as much to blame as the humanities professors at Evergreen. They're not making their voice heard. And while I can't attend every meeting because I am a student and that is my primary focus, I have heard of committees outside of the faculty meeting that are like an alternative to the faculty meeting going on at the same time, even same day, same time, and a lot of the science faculty are not there at the meetings.
I have either the alternative meeting or the regular meeting.
They might be at the alternative one, but I'm at the main one where all of the professors are sitting down. There are some brave souls who come into the regular faculty meeting, but it's not all of the time.
By brave souls, do you get the sense that there is it's a risky or tense?
It is. It's been put out there and it's been maintained that there is this conflict between some of the STEM professors and the rest of the universe, from what I can tell. But
not just the university, but the whole...
the entire universe. And even though I have a lot of respect for these professors, I sometimes wonder if the anxiety that they're displaying is worth it.
What do you mean worth it?
I'm working towards a better understanding, but I've just seen some things that just make me wonder, well, how are you going to work with people through this when you can't even get over yourself?
And do you think that pressure comes from the outside?
I think that pressure is entirely personal. And just from being around long enough and not being a scared student. I've just observed that. And also, I have high interest in the principles of psychiatry and psychology and the human as an animal to really notice that it's very, very forward, very present.
Do you think that there's something on an institutional level, and I'm not talking about administrative level, but just within the institution where there's a dysfunction going on and certain personality traits have just locked in? And if that's the case, how do you imagine that being changed, or is there a way forward?
It's evergreen, and we don't pay our teachers enough, and we don't have to have this high level of operation that can be dysfunctional, but I think a professor is a professor is a professor. And I have ambitions to teach someday, so this is totally self-reflective, as I think that it's definitely a personality type.
You're saying that is attracted to Evergreen or attracted to professoriate?
Just professoriate.
Okay,
just totally professors. It has its own personality.
Yeah. Okay.
And I appreciate my professors very much. They're on the level of personal heroes. It's great. They're good people.
Yeah. You work on the student council, the Gooey Duck Student Council, right?
Yeah, I'm on the Gooey Duck Student Union.
You briefly glossed the feeling of being in these faculty meetings. What is the kind of the status of the student governance?
The student governance is currently in a state of reorganization.
From within or
from within?
Okay.
And I totally am aware that I might get busted for saying that, because there's a lot of anxiety surrounding your interview process. So much so that I heard it approximately 5 times before saying, I'm going to go take an interview with Ben if he offers it. But we're reorganizing from the inside currently. There has been a lot of administrative difficulties between us and the administration because of internal insufficiency and accountability. And it's not any individual's fault this year. It's because of previous years' failures.
So you guys, when you guys landed in these positions, things were already on shaky ground?
Ineffective ground.
Okay. Because of the way that the students had run it, or because of the way that the administration had positioned the student governance?
Because of the way it was structured, we were supposed to have no hierarchical structure.
Okay.
We're supposed to be all on the same level. Which, to me personally, just speaking from my opinion and viewpoint, it is not reasonable.
To not have an executive, somebody that makes the decisions.
At least one person seen as being in a position of authority and move things along and
accountability.
Okay. So we're trying to work on an equivalent type of structure where all representatives do have a voice, but there are things like internal auditing and documents that describe different processes.
Okay,
and that's something that's been very much lacking.
Interesting. And you say that your current band of, I don't want to say misfits, so we'll just say fits.
Representatives.
Okay. You're the current quorum right now inherited a kind of an inefficient or broken system then.
We did.
And that system was built by previous student bodies?
It was.
Okay.
We had some people that said a lot of things, but never did a damn thing. Honestly, that's kind of how it is.
Do you think that if the representative body of the student union was at a higher functioning capacity, they would still have power to do things, or would the administration and the rest of the school follow their lead? Does the student body actually have power?
I think that they do.
Yeah.
I think that everybody at Evergreen, whether administrator, staff member, faculty member, and student, all have the ability to do quite a bit. And that is our strength is our Achilles heel. we are all seen as equivalents to each other by evergreen policies and foci and all of the things. It's supposed to be a collective learning environment, so that gives us a lot of power. But it also weakens us too at the same time.
Because there's not a leader, or the energies get bound up, kind of conflicting one another rather than aiming at a certain goal.
It's both. Both. The American culture, and this is my opinion, has become a very selfish culture. There's not really a look towards the collective anymore, and I'm interested in the psychological and sociology factors associated with that, but that's what I see the problem at Evergreen being, is that people are very bound to their agenda, to their opinion, and nobody really seems to want to work towards a collective. On the STEM side, I've found it more than anywhere else, where people want to be collective. I personally have a great lab team of 5 and 2 advisors who are amazing professors, and so there is some of it there, but at a high level it's not there.
It seems like with STEM that there can be fruitful competition because the rules are explicit. Like, there's these clearly defined rules that have been developed to depersonalize things to a certain degree. Everybody's egos invested in the project.
I know, right?
I'm sure.
Yeah, it's true.
And that's an important thing. That's very motivational. Do you have any ideas on how to export that sort of fruitful competition to the college governance or the college at large, or even within how faculty speak with one another? Or?
I think it's more than competition due to well-established principles. I think what the breakdown at Evergreen is that we have systems failures. We have system failures that are so deep and easily resolvable, but nobody's realized the nodes in which they exist and why it causes the system to break down. And I've realized this through personal experience. And it has no reflection of how well somebody is doing their job at Evergreen. But I personally went through a conflict with faculty recently, and the grievance process is really screwed up at Evergreen.
Okay.
The ability for a student to lodge an official complaint against a professor for misbehavior or perceived misbehavior is longer than it should be for anybody, arduous and emotionally destructive. And even though I can handle it as an adult student, I would be completely devastating to a much younger person.
Okay.
I don't think it's competition that's missing from the humanities. I think it's the breakdown of the system that we need to support things that are as flexible as the humanities.
One of the refrains from the protests, which are now just have their 2-year anniversary, was about this grievance process. Now, looking at all the footage and all the details that I've been able to find about all the protests, it was very difficult to find anything solid. Everybody was speaking in very general terms. But one of the things that they did point to was that this grievance process was broken, and that there needed to be more work on that. And that was a refrain from the administration that they would fix that. Have you seen the process, or are you just now aware by entering into the grievance process yourself? It seems like if that was a major complaint and they promised to fix that thing, they've gone out and built new equity centers and staffed up their equity branch and done all this stuff for this equity agenda. But that one functional aspect of the school, did they fix that? Or
No, it is still broken. It is still understaffed. They shouldn't have been focusing on equity and inclusion. They should be focusing on the Office of Rights and Responsibility. The people that work there are heavily efficient, but they are overloaded and they are very overworked.
What is the Office of Rights and Responsibility?
It was formerly known as the Conduct Office.
Okay.
So it is the office where faculty can file complaints against students, and students filing complaints against faculty goes through there and is routed through there, but it goes to human resources, which is also understaffed.
Yeah.
Because the teachers and faculty do have a union.
Yeah.
They have a union, so it has to go through HR. That is funded by Washington State. That is not funded by the Evergreen State College. The officers that are there for HR and for the student against faculty complaints is also understaffed. The grievance process needs a complete overhaul.
Yeah.
Even for faculty or institutional complaints against students, that process takes forever. That process is very long, arduous, incomplete, and it's not at the fault of the staff that is there. It's because the system there is broken. There's not enough staff. There's not enough outline for a system at all.
Is there clarification on how to go through this process, or did you get pre-stalled at that stage of the grievance process?
I got stalled early in the game. I had no idea who a mandated reporter was. I spoke to several people about the problem. I had no idea that the grievance process even existed, and this is how I have discovered that the information is not available at orientation.
That was one thing they explicitly said that they were going to fix during the protests.
It has not been fixed yet. I'm trying to work on that myself this summer. Because it is a breakdown.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I had no idea that they had already talked about this.
No, it's very prominent. That's the closest thing to a clear desire to change the institution for everybody, truly equitable, that would help everybody at the institution. That during the protest, that's one that isn't just weighted towards one group or one.
They hired a new director of rights and responsibilities after that.
Yeah.
She herself is very efficient, very knowledgeable, very much a kind person and an understanding, and has a huge amount of neutrality and flexibility as a human being. I've worked with her extensively now over the last 5 or 6 months.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of room for improvement. Mm-hmm. They already have their leader that's very well equipped. They just need to hire some extra staff, and maybe a systems person, because that's what it is, a systems breakdown.
What's a systems person?
A systems person is a person who is probably trained, and sometimes it's natural ability, but they can see nodes, they can see interconnections, they can see how things work better. It's a certain neural set that people can have, and it can be trained or it can be natural. I think Evergreen needs a natural with training. Somebody who's already been through the process several times.
Why do you think that the administration has diverted funds to this equity stuff when leaving other sectors of, like, even their state mandated sector of public records department is woefully understaffed, and it seems like they're doing that on purpose. But
one of the things about systems and human beings is that, and this is well documented, and there's a book called Thinking in Systems that's a primer that I recommend to everybody, and it says that the intuitiveness of what you would think should be fixed is almost never ever. It's always counterintuitive the right way to go.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So I think that Evergreen thought they would strengthen this department that had equity as a title, and that regulated this language between students, and this language between students and faculty was the way to go, because the objection to Professor Brett Weinstein's lectures and material was his language. It's still the objection. It's my objection. He needs to work on it because it's a serious problem. But the real way to go is to strengthen the grievance process at Evergreen and get it so that when students do feel wronged they're put through this official, well-outlined process.
Yeah. What is your hope for Evergreen as an institution, if it can weather the failure of enrollment that's going on right now? It's going to be pretty damn difficult, which is going to add to the stress. So if you could state your goal and then like kind of lay out like how do you think that the institution could get to that goal, or what do you think are the principles that it needs to center itself on?
I've taken a heavy personal interest in it. My first goal is for faculty hiring to be an established process that is bulletproof, and that includes students, and students who are specialists in their area or becoming specialists, the students that have ambition for grad school, the students who are heavily personally invested in whatever subject it is, whether it's business, whether it's literature, whether it's microbiology, and identify those students and bring them to the committee meetings to hire these new faculty, to allow them to question this person who is presenting to be hired. Also students on the hiring committees that put out the searches for the professors to identify the strengths. And that also takes the pressure off of the faculty that are there doing the searches by themselves. So that hiring process needs to be refined. The grievance process really needs to be overhauled terribly. And then Evergreen and its associated entities like the Clean Energy Committee needs to start putting on huge symposiums and huge public events to foster interest in Evergreen and state to the outside world that we're not just a bunch of weirdos that protest and start shit with everybody. Yeah. And that's what I really feel, honestly, and I'm personally invested in pursuing those 3 avenues to ensure Evergreen's survival. And from what I've seen, nobody's doing it, and everybody wants to tear Evergreen down, even from within. Either that or they're flailing.
The president of the college this year in his State of the College address gave a long-winded presentation. And one of the things that he did to, I guess, give everybody hope in the future of Evergreen was that he had some committee produce this document that showed the economic impact of Evergreen, and then he's brought that around to different businesses to show how much money supposedly Evergreen pumps into the economy. And one of my criticisms of that was that he's not selling the college as a college. It doesn't seem like he believes in the college, as an academic place where awesome academic things can happen. And I wonder if that's not because they've taken the route of lowering the bar of entry so low that they don't think that they can attract high-functioning students. Like what you were saying with the hiring committee, you need high-functioning students on that committee. And if they're only drawing from, that 98 percentile of, college not even ready, individuals, and really relying on that, then I don't see how it can foster an environment where awesome academics can happen.
I don't think that we're drawing low quality students, if that's what you're saying. I think that we can foster high quality students as well. They may have come in from a lower economic background and had, like in my field, had never been exposed to a lab, had never sat in an appropriate chemistry lab their whole life because they came from, outside of rural nowhere. I think you can foster that, but I think also people are just tired of the regular old standard. I think there are high functioning students at Evergreen. I think there are a ton of them, and I think they're very silent.
Do you think that they're well served even if they are silent? Do you think that they're brought up to speed? Do you think that a high functioning but low experienced student is given the tools and the resources to catch up?
In the labs they are.
Okay.
They most definitely are in the labs.
Okay.
I'm not really sure about other fields because I haven't been there. From what I understand, in the arts, yes. As limited as funding is right now for the arts. But I have heard from art students who feel like their faculty are right there working alongside them and fostering their education. And I have walked by the ceramic studio and seen amazing things because I don't want to cut through main campus and I just want to go to my lab. So I go around the back and see the ceramic studio. Yeah. And I'm seeing high function. Okay. I'm seeing good students. I'm seeing students that are busy. I'm seeing students that are hustling. And I think that the faculty is the critical point. I don't think that the administration is the critical point. I think the administration is supportive and facilitates the hiring of faculty, obviously, and, you know, helps with the grievance process, and they do that part, but the faculty is the joint issue. We have faculty that maybe shouldn't be there, and I'm not afraid to say that.
So, that said then, how does one inspire the faculty to kind of stand up? And if they have the power to write the direction of the college, how do you think that could happen? What do they need to hear? What do you think they need to hear?
They need to hear that the administration will support their decision as a whole, and the faculty needs to show up, and I'm not sure why they're not. I don't know if they're overwhelmed in the classroom. I'm not a faculty myself, so that's really a perspective I don't have. They need to be supported by the administration vocally, not fought against, which I know that quite a few faculty feel like they've been fought against by the administration. And they need to show up. 90% of everything is having your ass in the chair.
Yeah, that's true.
And if you can't have your ass in the chair, it's apparent that you don't care that much.
So what kind of student is Evergreen for?
A student that would get the most out of Evergreen is a student who has a high ambition to obtain that undergraduate degree, or in some cases that graduate degree, but maybe has mitigating factors in their life that makes it not so easy to obtain that. They need a little more flexibility than a standard university offers. The autonomy offered, the individual learning contracts, the opportunity for internships, the internship coordinators in the advising center are just amazing. All those opportunities are amazing. Okay. Those opportunities don't exist elsewhere. It's like you do your undergrad, you're basically reading out of a textbook and going to lecture with 300 other students. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the structure is totally different, but it is geared towards somebody who has ideas of their own. Even coming in, even as an 18-year-old or a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old, to attend Evergreen and be successful, you really have to have an idea of your own.
And do you think that the Evergreen is communicating that?
No.
What do you perceive them communicating?
Nothing. Nothing. There's no adequate language that I have seen in the literature to communicate what it's like to be at Evergreen. I just haven't, and that's also a communications department thing. We have to have the right people and the right system in place. Who's responsible for that is beyond me, because I've asked everybody and they're like, we don't really know.
They hired an outside firm for all that stuff.
We need to shit can the outside firm and take care of our own business because it's not working. I don't know who the outside firm is, but they need to go because they're not on the ground there. They don't know the special circumstances. It's the same complaint I have about people who will criticize from the outside that haven't been there because they're just so done with the whole you know, people showing up on campus and, you know, waving
Starting
their
shit.
dead baby signs.
Okay.
And young people are feeding right into it, and us older jaded people are like, I have to go get coffee and go to seminar or I'm gonna die and not get this quarter finished,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we got people we need to feed at home. So.
Yeah, it's kind of it's the opposite of a honey trap. It's really incendiary stuff. It doesn't really do anything, but because Evergreen is known as a easy to trigger institution or student body, then it's going to drag people there.
I think all young people are easy to trigger, though.
That's true. I mean, the people who do that, they go from one college to the other college to the other college to the other college.
It can get really bad, though. It can get really bad. It can be beyond trapping a professor. And, you know, it can be... I think our ultimate fear is a repeat of Kent State, where the National Guard was called in and it was one set of young people being ordered to fire on another set of young people. And I think that's our ultimate fear.
Do you have the sense that Evergreen's anywhere near the powder keg that it was 2 years ago?
I think it's worse.
Really?
I think it's a lot worse.
Really? You think that the tension among the student body and the professoriate is worse than it was 2 years ago?
I do.
And that it could... Do you think that it could erupt again?
I do.
Really?
Yeah, most definitely.
What do you think... why do you think that is, and what condition would cause that to happen?
I think that there is a dialogue that goes on, and it's not a conversation, it's a one-way dialogue that divides us. And I'm not sure where it's coming from. I've been told that a couple of professors are propagating that language. I've seen it myself. It pisses me off.
What's the dialogue? Monologue?
They use words to describe a dominant, unfair culture. And they use words like the patriarchy. They use words like white culture. And they use words that are divisive rather than unifying. To me, and I would get shit from people that I know, those words are divisive and we should not be using them. And they're like, oh, you can't police our language. If it's divisive and non-beneficial and non-productive, why the fuck are we using it? Like, honestly, why are we using words like white culture?
And so you're saying that sort of language is a part of the status quo at this point?
It seems to be, at least among some groups. And I don't appreciate it. Personally, I don't appreciate it.
You've been subjected to that, and you've seen...
I was subjected to that in a GUI Student Union meeting, and I will say that because it pissed me off so bad and I never got any resolution.
Were you able to confront that kind of language?
No.
Did everybody automatically shut you down when you said that this is...
No, I was told that there would be no discussion about it.
Oh. Well, that makes it easy for you, I guess.
Because the person who was presenting it didn't have to answer questions because of who they were.
Okay.
And no. If you're going to present material and you don't want to answer for that material, you shouldn't be presenting it at all. But that's true on the other hand, too. If you have controversial material that goes against that, and you don't want shit for it, and you don't want to be run off of campus, you shouldn't be presenting it.
Okay. So you should stand your ground and state your case.
You should state your case.
Yeah. And do you think that there's an environment or a culture that allows people to state their case?
Oh, yeah.
Across difference? Like,
yeah.
No matter what your position is?
I mean, I think it's all... I'm not going to say it's not real. I think the ability to not to is totally internalized and it's anxiety-based.
Okay.
Because I have said some things on Evergreen that made a lot of people unhappy. Like a lot of people.
And you live to tell the tale.
I live to tell the tale. I'm still there. I'm still doing the degree.
Yeah.
I'm still working through it. I'm still enjoying the autonomy that's provided to me. I'm still communicating with my professors on a daily basis. And all of the controversy that's come up off of the things that have come out of my mouth doesn't usually bother me that much on a daily basis.
But you're saying that there's an atmosphere of tension on the campus still that's worse than it was, and it has to do with this dominant culture narrative, or this language of white culture and privilege and that kind of stuff. You're saying that that's still
It's
in
still
effect.
there. We're alienating people that we need. We are alienating people that we need, especially cis white male professors. We are absolutely alienating them, and we need them.
Why do you need them?
Because they are part of our faculty. Because they're providers of information. I want to hear from them too. I don't really care what color their skin is. I know that's not true for everybody. I am aware that some people need people who look like them to function in an academic environment. And I get that. I understand that. But for me, as a STEM student, if they have passed muster with the faculty hiring committee and they have been there at Evergreen for 20 years, I want to hear from them no matter what the color of their skin is. And whether they're a cis male or a trans person or a female or whatever it is that they identify as or present as, if they've been there 20 years and they've gotten through the process and they've lived to tell the tale, I want to know what they're thinking.
Okay.
I want that education. That's what I'm paying for.
Yeah.
I don't want a certain percentage of the faculty silenced because of what they look like.
And you perceive that people are being silenced because of their classification.
I do.
Okay. And
I do.
where does that attitude come from?
I think it is kind of, it's a negative bias. I don't know if you've ever heard of that psychological principle.
I know of bias, but what's negative?
Negative bias is where the human brain, over time in evolution, is attracted to what's negative, what's dangerous. And that's part of our evolution as a mammal. A lot of mammals are have negative bias. Humans have negative bias. National Science Foundation says that 80% of our thoughts are negative. 95% are repetitive. So if 80% of everything is shit, that's what you're going to think about. That's what you're going to think about. And I don't think that to be extremely varied based on level of education. And so I think that there's these trigger words, there are these ideas that are bounced around on Evergreen campus about who's okay and who's not okay and why they're not okay, that everybody pays attention to because of that very human negative bias. And I think that it affects the people who those descriptions are about. White cis male professors. And then I think that other people hear that and that's who they think about. It's just a common psychological aspect. It's not specific to Evergreen. It's not rare. It's everywhere. And it's just getting worse. I think we need to be self-aware and stop.
My interaction with what is now called the Department of Inclusive Excellence, which used to be the Department of Equity and Inclusion, which used to be the Multicultural First Peoples Department.
Okay.
My interactions with them when I was a student there were through trainings, which perpetuated a narrative that the cis white, whoever has the most privilege, which is that cluster of classification that we say over and over again, those people were the most privileged, and that was hammered into it over us over and over and over again, where they would make these charts over and over and over again. And that was a part of this whole privilege, oppression, anti-oppression, anti-racism work that they were doing, which I had a problem with because I saw that it was adulating the negative. It was making oppression the focus rather than a common humanity. And actually they went through and systematically attacked individualism, meritocracy, and universalism. Explicitly said that to think that your work gets you ahead in life is wrong because it's not true all the time. To think that the individual is the thing that you should be talking to is wrong because everybody's a nest of these power structures and stuff, and that's more important. And I understand that there is a truth to that way of looking at the world, but if everybody believes that, or if everybody thinks in that way, I try to say, and I thought, and I still think, that that was the death, or would be the death of any institution that really embraced that would end up tearing people apart because they would feed upon oppression and feed upon privilege. So I wonder if you think that it is a part of the culture of Evergreen that can be flushed out, or if it needs to be called out, and in calling it out, if people can listen to the criticism and take it not as a personal assault or a part of this alt-right Fox Benjamin Boyce attack on the institution, but like this very primary criticism that this way of thinking is not going to help the institution grow and flourish and heal.
I think we need to frame things better than we do. I think we need to frame things, starting at the beginning, with biological principles. And I think these blanket statements and not taking people as an individual is where we falter. Because our tendency as human beings, and part of our evolution, is to pigeonhole. Because you have to get through, you don't have time to deal with the information, you just have to box it off and kind of put it over there. So I think we need to change the language of understanding at Evergreen to be able to remove what I like to call the shit parts. Because, I mean, that's my inner veterinarian coming out.
Remove the shit parts in the way that we see other people, the way that we perceive other people?
Yeah, we can't pigeonhole anybody.
Okay.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Okay.
It's absolutely insane to say, just because you have this color of skin, well then, oh poor you were marginalized. Most people look at me and they see a white person or somebody who's kind of white person. It's just as bad as other forms of bigotry. I have genetics in a culture that experienced genocide. My father is darker than I am, but his genetics that are obviously from that affect me. I've had genetic testing that say I have these weird liver single nucleotide polymorphisms that make it so that certain types of drugs don't work on me. You can't see that in my face, and pigeonholing people like that is completely unfair and completely wrong, and is just as bad as any white supremacist. And I will get so busted for saying that, but it is just as awful. It's equivalent, and we need to remove this language.
How do we inspire people to avoid that language or change the way that they look at things? It seems like the way that, insofar as I know, George Bridges is very concerned from the moment he sat down on the Evergreen campus and decided to go forward with his agenda, was that we were going to think about race and think about oppression, and he empowered people who made the Black Lives Matter a core philosophy of Evergreen. I think that was a short-sighted move. I think that didn't appeal to everybody to work together on this. Rather, it appealed to everybody to classify themselves on how responsible they should feel about oppression.
From my understanding, the administration's job is to secure funding for Evergreen. And with that said, they should probably continue to focus on fulfilling that role, because they have been successful. This year in the legislature, by just a miracle, and the hard work of our legislative teams, including the GSU's legislative team, they're amazing individuals.
Okay.
They secured funding for the school. But that's the administration's job. The president, vice presidents. Their job is to go get the money. And they should leave any, I don't know, would that be a theological argument?
I would want to say yes, but
up to
probably another
cultural arguments, theological arguments, any cultural standard for Evergreen up to the professors and the students.
Okay.
Rather than trying to talk down from above to give us this idea that just confuses everything.
Okay.
And because it is a hierarchy, and this is our president, and this is who we should be listening to, he should probably just stop while he's ahead. Because this year was really good in the legislature.
Okay. So there was an unofficial faculty poll that went out that graded the administration, and that was the the only positive, like the strong positive for the administration. It seems like the faculty are very disappointed in a variety of ways that the administration has acted, but one thing that they have succeeded at is securing funding from the legislator. So the president's office is there to get funding, to manage the reputation, and then to manage the security. They're having a hard time finding another police chief because of the way that they treated the last one. The reputation is outsourced to a firm that you don't think is representing the...
How can you know? How can you know? How could you know from the outside what Evergreen's like? It's impossible.
No. Unless you... Which is just so unfortunate that in a very twisted, ironic way, if you squint and look at the protests in the right way, you'll see something that was world class that will never be trumped by any other student protest. Like, they did a protest Evergreen style, balls to the wall, totally over the top. Like, nobody could ever repeat that. So, like, in a way that really does show, like, the strength of an Evergreen education. Now, if they were only pivoted or directed in a different way, things could have changed a lot. But like I was saying, so security, it doesn't seem like they're fulfilling their job with security. It doesn't seem like they're fulfilling their job with reputation. It does seem that they are fulfilling their job with legislative funding, but that's only half of our ticket. The other half of the ticket is enrollment. And if enrollment doesn't change, then Evergreen cannot succeed, cannot go forward. And so I think that the job of the marketing department would be to say what you said and really describe honestly and forthrightly what is an Evergreen student. And I think that Brett and Heather made a case before, at the very end of time the administration kicked them out. They kicked them out like a week before classes started.
I know.
They really screwed over the science department.
It was hard to compensate for 2 lost professors.
Yeah. But they were saying that what we need to do is show the world what an Evergreen education is and what an Evergreen student is. And I'm sure a lot of people at Evergreen dislike me, but I'm another person who shows what an Evergreen education can do. And so far as my work ethic, probably not my opinions don't come from Evergreen. My opinions are my own, but my ambition and the depth of discovery that I've pushed out of the place. Anyways, what I'm saying is that there is a case to be made that Evergreen does have a role in Washington education. It does have a unique experience to give. But certain things need to change in order for people to see that and for that to be effective.
It's true. People are terrified of you at Evergreen. A lot of people don't want to confront the truth, and I don't think that's specific to Evergreen. I think that's everywhere in the United States. I don't know why that is. I don't know why that is, but everybody is fearful of each other. People, there are some cis white male professors at Evergreen that people are terrified of, and I'm confused because I'm just like, I yelled at that professor, and they totally are like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry I was a jerk, It's like, I don't know why people are terrified of each other there. Probably because they've been fed that way. Also, people don't know the whole truth. Like, nobody knows that you're an Evergreen student. It's just this guy from this YouTube channel who's talking shit on Evergreen. That's all that they see.
Every third episode I say that I'm from Evergreen, but whatever.
Well, when you're putting information out there, like 10% of it goes through and is retained, approximately. Yeah. That's probably the other percentage from the 80% that's not repetitive or not negative. But yeah, they definitely need to advertise what an Evergreen student's like. I'm personally working on a project with the library dean to talk about the history of Evergreen and collect information from our very own archives and then maybe from other people's archives as well. We don't know yet entirely. So we haven't gotten into it.
Is that like a year-long project or something?
No, summer fellowship.
Oh, you are going to be busy this summer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, that's what going to Evergreen's all about.
Yeah.
Balls to the wall.
Yeah.
Whether it's, blocking administrators into rooms or or studying,
or taking the legislator by storm with an internship, or
yeah.
designing a science degree that's basically a master's degree in a Bachelor of Arts container.
It's true, and that's Evergreen. It's the balls to the wall, 100% all the time. Let's go. Let's get it going. It's totally true, and whatever that external entity isn't doing a very good job.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They're not there. You gotta have people doing it that are there every day.
Well, let's sum things up. What do you think that Evergreen in and of itself, inside itself, should hear about itself in order to survive and to thrive?
It needs to fix its internal processes. It needs to revamp them, hire more people. It's not just good people. We already have good people. It needs to hire more people, assistants. We need bigger events that are totally Evergreen style. Off the wall, kind of weird, highly effective, that go with what people know Evergreen's about. Evergreen's about change, about focus, about drive. Like I said before, I'm trying to put together a climate symposium about, and that I want that to be huge. I want people to want to go that can't go because it's too far away, or it's, the tickets are sold out already. And we need to support our faculty and make sure the faculty that are coming in are good people and want to be there. Mm-hmm. And aren't just taking a low-paying job because they can.
Yeah.
I think that's very few, but
Brett and Heather explicitly said that there's a trade-off with what you get paid at Evergreen. There's a trade-off. You get paid low, but there's a high amount of freedom, and that freedom can be abused, but it can be completely used in utterly novel fashions.
That's why we have to make sure that we are hiring people who are good people.
And then giving them a climate
where they can survive.
Yeah.
I know. I've watched a couple of professors really go through it. Really, really, they look worried. Mm-hmm. On the harder days, they look worried, especially right after the protests.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining me. I'm going to wrap it up because I think the batteries are all about dead.
Okay. Thanks for inviting me.